everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Sourcing Showcase run by the Textile and Fashion Hub. It's lovely to see you all here this afternoon, particularly on such a beautiful sunny day, so thank you. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional Wurundjeri owners of this land. I'd like to pay respects to elders past and present of the Wurundjeri Nation and extend those respects to other Aboriginal people present. My name is Fabia Pryor and I'm the Sustainable Projects Officer here at the Textile and Fashion Hub. I'd like to thank the International Fibre Centre for making today possible. Without their valued support, we wouldn't be able to put on the suite of sustainability events that we've been able to put on this year and in past years. We have 5 speakers here this afternoon, each providing a snapshot of their area of expertise. So the presentations will be delivered in short, sharp TED Talk style delivery, with the idea being that we'll provide you a suite of different options that are available out there, and then you can go away and delve into these further at your leisure. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Daniel Mackey. He's the Deputy CEO Policy of the Forest Stewardship Council. Daniel has a strong background in supply chain certification. We therefore thought we'd kick off with him, as he'll lay the groundwork for us in explaining how to source sustainably using certification as a measure of sustainability. Daniel has worked with Fair Trade Australia, including on its cotton certification, and currently works with the Forest Stewardship Council. This is a certification body of great relevance to us in the textile and fashion sector, particularly when it comes to fibres and packaging. So welcome, Daniel.
Okay, thank you, Fabia, and so I'll try and be as fast as possible. I know how fast 7 minutes can go. I have 8 slides, so I'm going to be doing one Mississippi, 2 Mississippi in my head as I go along. As Fabia mentioned, my background is in certification and labelling. My role in certification and labelling is to be basically a jack of all trades and master of nothing. Certification and labelling covers so many aspects of industry, whether it's product knowledge in terms of the actual characteristics of a product, through to marketing of the product, supply chain logistics, policy, all these things. So I'm very good at talking at a very abstract level about a lot of things, but if you ask me any in-depth questions about big things, I'm very, very happy for the second time I should say that. So I'm going to talk really quickly though about certification and labelling. This isn't a new topic. I'm sure all of you guys are aware of the idea that there are these third-party certification systems out there that can provide, for want of a better term, a rubber stamp to what you do. Now, within the labelling industry, we tend to talk about ourselves as being very new, but we've been around enough now to have learned a lot of really hard lessons. There's been a lot of trial and error in the certification industry, and so it is still, despite being around now for 20, 25 years, it is an area where there's still a lot of dynamism, there's a lot of experimentation and innovation, and there's a lot of room for growth still. In a lot of the markets and product categories that certification is still working, we're still talking about market penetration, volume ratios that are in the below 30% or well under 10% in some product areas. So we've still got a long way to go, but we have learned a lot, and the lessons that businesses using certification and labelling and the lessons from the stakeholders involved in certification and labelling can be used to great effect by businesses if they approach it in the right way. And that's what a little bit of my talk is going to be about. And I hope you like my greenwashing pun visual up there. Really, really quickly, why certification and labelling? I think most people would know why labelling is out there. If you have a look at any market research or any trends around lifestyles of health and sustainability, or low-HAS consumer segments, or low-HAS consumer reporting, a lot of these surveys, a lot of these metrics go back to the early 90s in different forms. And if you have a look at the kind of issues that consumers are looking for when they're talking about the values that they attribute beyond price, beyond quality, beyond quantity to a product, these things actually change quite a bit. In the early 90s, you were talking about the ozone layer and the CFCs and that sort of. As you got through the mid-90s, you started looking at paper recycling, these sort of things, deforestation. These became the key issues, particularly in terms of packaging, on a lot of consumer minds. Move forward to now, we're all talking about water and we're all talking about carbon. These things come and go. They go up and down on the hierarchy of concerns all the time. But there is one thing that has constantly gone up and up and up through that time and stays up as the most pejorative concern of all consumers, and that's the issue of trust. Consumers have been burnt so many times by the green claims of organisations that they don't trust organisations. Even organisations who are doing the right thing, particularly if they're a bit bigger, struggle to be able to tell that message to consumers because consumers automatically a little bit suspicious of their claims because of their experiences. And so this is where third-party certification comes in. So this is a few of the things that have come out of Melbourne report that is run here in Australia. If you have a look at the link there, or just if you just Google the Melbourne group, they actually do a lot of the market research in Australia regarding trends around sustainability and consumption. But I'll probably jump straight to the last one. And one of the key insights that they always find is the key message to marketers from consumers is that the emphasis on the but it's all about trust. And this is where certification comes in. When I talk about trust to businesses, when you talk about certification labeling, you talk about a gap in trust. When you talk to campaigners or stakeholders about why they should get involved or why they should support certifications, we start using the two key words, and that's assurance and interventions. What I'm going to talk about now is understanding labelling and certifications as a concept, as an intervention in a problem or an issue that you as a business, a consumer, or even some government policymakers might have, and how certification fits into that intervention by providing training. I came up with this a little while ago. If you talk to anyone who's doing marketing in sustainability, if you talk to stakeholders involved in actually building certification from the ground up, as many of the labels have been built by sort of organic stakeholder collaborative movements, these are all the questions that they sort of go through at some point. And these questions are really key because one, they help you to define a narrative about how you market a product that's sustainable. They define the way that you choose a certification label to find the right one for your business. And it's the way that consumers or advocates around sustainability and ethical issues will evaluate a certification label and advocate for its use by companies. So the first one is, what's the issue? So I'm from Stewardship Council, obviously. Our biggest issue is deforestation. We have a bunch of other things that are tied up with that, social, environmental and economic. We came together in 1994, basically because a lot of global and local organisations, particularly around North America, Europe and Latin America, had enough of hating each other and fighting each other, and they wanted to come together to try and find the right way to move forward on some of these issues because government wasn't getting it done, protesting, tying people to trees and bulldozers wasn't getting it done. Boycotting wasn't getting it done either. So they looked at all these lessons and they thought, what can we do? And the first thing they realised is that transparency, traceability and offering a solution rather than just talking about the problem was the key. So they talked about that. They realised that how does this issue relate to production and consumption? The first thing that came up was there is no traceability and there is no transparency in the supply chain. So all right, we need to look at developing a label. We need to develop some sort of ethical standard that people can trust and businesses can use. What is preventing improvement or change? Again, traceability, transparency, but also stakeholder involvement. And so that's where I'll talk about it very briefly again. FSC's governance and certification processes is all about stakeholder participation rather than just ticking boxes through that process. What are the interventions required? So this is where you start getting into a little bit more detail about what it is you're trying to change. So I've got just a couple of points here. The kinds of interventions that a label or a certification system can make can be anything depending on the issue. Most of them, however, at some point the key intervention is transparency and independent verification of certain claims. However, depending on the kind of product, physical traceability might be a key issue for people that they need to develop some policies around. Another might be the actual production methods or an impact at different stages of the supply chain, whether you're talking about the actual raw materials coming into products or the manufacturing and processing of the products all the way through. Physical product characteristics. for example, it's always really key to look at who's behind the firms and what is their relationship to the actual the monitoring and the assessment. So how independent are auditors from the body who develops the standards, and who's actually developing the standards. And the broader your stakeholder base, the more credible that standard is most likely going to be, and the more kudos you're going to get from different segments of civil society, government, or consumers. Sorry, keep pointing it out. A couple of quick examples of that. So FSC, where I work, our issue is deforestation. Obviously, with most of these labels, they have more than one issue. Organic, for example, generally has quite a few social aspects to its standards. Fair trade, who I used to work for, the main issue they're dealing with, rules of poverty, their intervention, is the terms of trade between a producer and a trader, making sure cotton growers get a fair price. Organic, as I mentioned, one of the key issues is the impacts of chemicals, both in terms of raw materials but also processing and the development of the product. So their intervention is prescriptions regarding the exclusion of chemicals. And finally, ECA, who I'm not going to talk about because I'm talking later anyway. But as you can see, one of the issues they're dealing with is workers' rights, and so their intervention is the workplace monitoring. And this is why I talk about these as interventions. And they're interventions at different parts of the supply chain, and they are also interventions in the market as a labelling tool as well, and as a brand. Just really quickly, so what's the issue with forest and textiles? So I mentioned it as well, and it's probably the same issue that most people are aware of with forest and paper, and the turning of wood chips into pulp. Now, this is such a massive process on such a global scale. The supply chain is reaching every part of the planet, developing world, tropical, subtropical, boreal, you name it. These are massive supply chains, and they're incredibly complicated. And the processes it's a bit of a hard thing, but the less the product looks like the original thing it came from, probably the more need you have for traceability and transparency. And paper, textiles, I think, meet that perfectly. So one of the big issues we have, despite Sting visiting the Amazon back in the late 80s, we are still losing massive chunks of forest around the world at ridiculous rates. This is the big issue has moved from Latin America and now Southeast Asia where this is happening. In many cases, it's because you don't have significant tenure of land. You have small communities who are being driven off their land. They're being driven off to plant things like palm oil, but more than anything, they're not being given a sustainable way to produce timber and get a fair and reasonable price for it. And there's no traceability or accountability in that. And so that's where FSC is. So this is still happening. A recent survey or research by Canopy, which is an organisation in the industry, found that these endangered forests, where you're talking about old growth forests, you're talking about key ecosystem services in terms of carbon sequestration, water catchments in rural communities, indigenous communities in terms of their rights and benefits, are all being significantly harmed by the rapid deforestation in these areas. And also rare and threatened species is usually top of this one off the go. So this is still happening. So they've looked into this. The other key thing I didn't mention as well, if you have a look here, so dissolving pulp, the base material for layering viscose, wastes approximately 70% of the tree and is a chemically intensive manufacturing process. One of the intangibles I didn't mention with the, I guess with the intervention that certification and labelling makes, and putting in the sort of accountability, putting in third-party monitoring, but also putting in best practice. Simon and I was talking about how that's quite a subjective thing, but certification allows people to learn best practice from other organisations as well. This is really what it does is helps to ascribe value to the product. And when I'm talking about value, I'm not just talking about, oh yeah, I feel good when I buy this product. I'm talking about the economic value. So if you're certifying the forests and you're forcing them to go through these processes, the product's going to cost more. It's a fact of the matter. Financially, compliance costs, all these things come into it. Traceability and auditing, they all have costs. Changing your processes to meet certain ethical and environmental standards has costs. So it means that the buyers are going to have to purchase these inputs at a higher price if they want to be certified. What that means, that intangible, is that you have an economic incentive, you have an economic driver to reduce waste elsewhere in the business as well. And that's one of those little how does FSC work in all of this? So we have interventions across the entire way. So we have the source of the fibre, we certify against 10 FSC principles. These principles cover everything from the legality. I'm not sure if many of you know about some of the issues in forestry, but illegal timber harvesting is a massive issue. The Australian government, the EU and Canada and the US have all passed legislation dealing with the importing of illegal timber and trying to stop it. We deal with workers' rights, we deal with Indigenous rights, community rights, high conservation values, and also the use of pesticides, as well as protecting general environmental values as well. So at that source, we're having all those impacts. Processing and tracking of the fibre, chain of custody in any certification system is key. FSC has quite rigid chain of custody, as does organic, ICA, all these sort of guys. And finally, promoting the product or the company or sale. One of the other things that certification, or good, credible certification brands that, like I mentioned, have more stakeholders behind them, provide more opportunities for businesses to meet other businesses and all that sort of thing. One of the things I've found working in fair trade, one of the things I've found working in FSC is that another intangible that comes out of all this sort of thing is business contacts and networking. Because forcing yourself to be open, forcing yourself to learn the lessons of other businesses creates a really good space for conversation, collaboration, and innovation. And they're all, convenient buzzwords that get thrown around all the time, but they do happen in this space. What I will say though, as a caveat to all that, one of the challenges of any credible label is all those stakeholders behind it. So whilst we're encouraging innovation, sometimes we can also work really, really slow. We've just had our General Assembly in Spain last week, where our members from all around the world, over 600 members, including unions, development agencies, WWFs, Greenpeace, all these guys come together and decide what the policies and processes are of FSC moving forward. I'm still, as a policy manager, trying to work out how I'm going to enact some of the motions from the 2008 General Assembly because of all the nastiness that comes with it. So we do move slowly, but that is because we've got so many people behind us. So that's the strength of the certification in general. And finally, at the end of it, like I mentioned, who is behind a label is really, really key. And so this is a quick snapshot of FSC. Everything we do is through a tripartite system. So my board at an international level, our board here in Australia, and in our standards and policy committees, all represent an equal weighting of social, economic and environmental interests. So right now, one of the projects we're working on is an FSC forestry standard for Australia. Using a boxing analogy, I guess, in one corner we have Forestry Tasmania, in another corner we have the Woodland Society, in another corner we have the Sea Community. And these guys, they get along great, they come together under this agreed international approach to having a strong, frank conversation around what are the issues, how do we define responsible forest management. This isn't happening in any other forestry standard or policy setting around the world. And this is because it's voluntary. There's a lot to be said for the voluntary certification. It hasn't been forced by governments, and that people and the stakeholders feel that they have a sense of ownership over it. Finally, the monitoring. Like I said, we have economic members, we have members who are certified. One of our board members is a plantation manager. So we need to also have to ensure that these guys are as separated as possible from the actual auditing processes and making certification decisions. So while everybody is involved in setting policy, what we have next to FSC International, we have ASI, Accreditation Services International. They set the standards for the auditors who are actually going in and assessing the management of these things. So it's a little bit hard to communicate that to stakeholders sometimes, and sometimes there's a perception of a conflict of interest. But at any point in the process, we could have, for example, the chair of an FSC office being investigated because of a certification decision. But our general philosophy of this is that it's important to have everybody in the tent. It's important to be inclusive and have as many people involved in the conversation as possible. That's probably one of FSC's key strengths, and any credible certification standard or organisation, that's their strength. Who is behind the label? Who is deciding the terms? And what are the interventions that they're dictating to be certified against? And at the end of the day, do those interventions actually relate to making positive change? The third, supply and demand is a bigger issue for certification as it is any other product category or industry. A credible certification standard means that there's significant and robust change happening around, and often that takes time. And so I know within FSC, one of the big challenges we have, and that was one of the big discussions in Spain, was how do we get to a point credibly, how do we scale up credibly where supply will meet demand? Because at the moment, particularly in certain product categories, papers, supply isn't meeting demand for FSC certification. So that is a challenge. On the trust side of that, one of the biggest challenges for any certification system is having businesses, many of them unknowingly, some of them unknowingly at the table, and making ambiguous claims or attaching more of their general brand to certification than the actual product that they are really allows. And it's a bit of a challenge for any consumer who's interested, or any advocate who's interested in this. We believe strongly that the carrot is more productive than the stick, so to speak. And so we encourage people to keep buying that product and keep supporting their business, but at the same time ask the question, why isn't the rest of this product being certified? But like I say, because particularly for the big guys, you're talking about significant change and moving away from business as usual. Not just at the production end, but a lot of checks, a lot of ways, even just their internal accounting systems and changes there. These things do take time. Having said that, if you're not happy with the rate of change, they may do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I just realised also, if you would like to win, I forgot this, our marketing guy's going to kill me. If you would like to win a trip before all expenses paid to Jarvis Bay, to an eco-resort paper camp, which is an awesome glamping experience. It's actually FSC Friday, this Friday. Entries close tomorrow night, I understand. All you've got to do is go onto our Facebook page, make the pledge to support FSC, put in a pithy 25 words or less caption, and you could win a pretty awesome